Jen, it's such a pleasure to be together in this
Always.
virtual world of ours. And I wanted to start with just going through a little bit of your exploration, your journey with music and with the voice, really. The voice, not only in terms of music, but language in both the literal language, but also the musical language. So maybe we could start with how you came to music as such a primary part of your focus.
Yes. I mean, I think I have to thank my parents for kind of being thrown into the world of music. And of course, at first it was Western classical music, um, which my dad somehow was able to find in Taiwan, as a kid with growing up in the middle of, World War II and having no shoes. And somehow he found Western classical music. And so that was passed down to me. It was kind of always there in the house. My brother and I both started very early with lessons, of course, piano. And then for me, I continued violin and ballet, of course, was there, and eventually singing, which came later. And at first, it was actually musical theater that got me singing. And before, I was very shy, but musical theater was the opening. And then through that music, I did start, starting to study opera and art song. But on the side, what excited me more actually was singing with, these jazz combos or groups that would ask me. One at the very end of high school, and then all throughout college at Stanford. So that to me was just, it was infectious, and I found myself more interested in improvisation, and and of course I had this amazing opera teacher, Jennifer Lane, who actually encouraged me to kind of apply the breath, all the techniques she was kind of instilling in me about supporting the voice, and her kind of encouragement was like, well, you can do that with any kind of singing, and without throwing your voice out or developing nodes, which is the scariest thing. Um, Although in pansori you should in Korean
All right,
traditional
we'll get to
singing
pansori from
later,
Korea
yeah.
in a little while. But
Yes.
but so you're in musical theater and then going
Hmm.
into jazz, and this
Yes,
is
because
all in Stanford, right? So you have gone to the Bay Area to
yep.
California. Was that a big
Hmm.
influence?
Absolutely. And I think the reason why it kind of musical theater brought me into jazz is because a lot of the greats, that I first listened to, Charlie Parker and all these great, bebop musicians, they were taking these songs from shows, and taking Gershwin tunes, and then improvising off of these melodies, and that was kind of how I entered through Cole Porter and Cy Coleman, um, and and yeah. So by the time I graduated from Stanford, I was a little bit at a crossroads. I was supposed to go to opera conservatory, but somehow I felt that wasn't my voice. That wasn't my real voice, and I instead just got some part-time jobs, but continue sang it with a drummer's band and just sang around town in the South Bay and the Bay Area. And that's when I met Francis Wong and John Jang and Jenny Lim, and these really important Asian American artists and activists. And and activism at that time for me was not on my radar. I was very new to understanding identity, and this comes from say 22 years of really denying my own heritage, being born in Peoria, Illinois, and I think as a kind of defense mechanism against racism and kind of the ostracization that I experienced, I really wanted to assimilate and, be like everyone else. And so it was really Francis and John and Jenny
So
that,
when I think of
yeah.
Francis and John and Jenny,
Hmm.
I first encountered them when they created the Asian American Jazz Festival in the Bay Area.
Yes. Yep.
But they're fierce. They're all
Yes.
fierce, and they're fierce
Very.
storytellers.
Yes. And they really, I think it was such an awakening for me. And it was the way that they really nurtured the community around them. So for folks younger than them, like Mia Masaoka, who I also met at that time, who was like an older sister to me. Um, and around that time, I also met Vijay Iyer, and and I met Fred Ho, who had already gone to New York at that time, and so it was, Hafez Madirzadeh. So just meeting all these amazing artists from all corners of the world, and working together, creating art together. Um, that was really new to me, and yeah, that was definitely a life changing, um, I think, moment for me at that time.
So there's a
Yeah.
community of Asian American musicians who come together, are going in a variety of new directions. Uh,
Mhm.
and so you're finding that voice means more than one thing.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, much more. I think what Francis, when I first was thinking about going to Taiwan, where my dad was born, um, Timor-Leste was so far away from me. And I think at that time, still, it was under political stress and unrest. Didn't become independent until 2002. So getting to Taiwan was easier. And and when I was kind of talking to Francis and getting his opinion, he said, "Yeah, you might just want to hang out. It'd be good to hang out in Taiwan," and that, I could never have imagined the depth of what that meant, because it meant not just going after. Of course, I was so interested in indigenous music from Taiwan, the the tribes, that still remained, and their music that they were um, producing, which I had never heard before until I heard a recording from Amoeba Records on Haight Street. And so that was like so fascinating to me, because to me it was closer to like Native American singing, or even Santeria chant that I was learning because I was so obsessed with Afro-Cuban music. And so that really made me question, like, what are the connections here? You know, um, Chinese music is so much, a different, and Taiwanese music is this and that, and so I was just really, really trying to understand why I heard similarities, and what were the deeper connections,
And was part of
Um,
that the kind of Bay Area where there's so much music, such a world of music exists, and so
mhm.
many people who are so deeply committed to their music making?
Absolutely. I mean, because I remember uh, when I first met Francis, we had a long talk, of course, about all these, career and strategic uh, and positioning. It's all these words that were new to me. But then he invited me to salon, and the salon was at Kalan Nishimi, I think it was Nishimoto's studio, and it was literally, he had a clipboard and anyone could sign up to perform, and it was a potluck also. Everyone brought food and little snacks, and I saw Buto dancer with a taiko artist, and then beautiful Filipino drummer Jimmy Biala, but who was steeped deeply in Afro-Cuban and Brazilian percussion and jazz drumming, and and so I just went up there and I sang "Summertime" with John Carlos Pereira and Francis and Jimmy Biala, and that was the first time I felt like I wasn't singing a standard just to sing a standard. it was really, this is a moment where I can find my voice,
So
through
it
this.
became your own.
I
You
was
grabbed it.
finding, I found more, I was getting closer
Yeah,
to what my
yeah.
voice was. Because there was no, it was like it was this opening. And so we were, really through the, this deep tradition of, you know, Af, Black American music, through jazz. It was like I was able to kind of get closer to, what are my ancestors saying in there, and it was, and the space, they allowed that to happen, and it was such a, really cross-cultural. I know that's such a phrase out there, but it really was like we were just coming from
Well, I'm
such different
fascinated by the
directions.
fact that you went from opera to musical
Mm-hmm.
theater to
Mm-hmm.
jazz to this
Right.
kind of salon meeting and community of musicians. And
Right.
then, if I understand correctly, you wanted to sail further.
Yeah.
You wanted to
Well, it was
go
it
into a
was
deeper
yes.
exploration.
Yes. And actually it was a flutist, Leon Lee, who also I met through Francis, who I think, I don't know if he's still in China, but then did a lot of music and was very involved in presenting music in China. And he told, he was the one who really made me understand, like, okay, even if I take Taiwanese folk songs on paper that my dad had given me from my fourth grand auntie, even though I was making arrangements of them, sounded fine, but I really didn't know where these songs came from. I had to go there.
So the
So
soul of
that's,
the music you had to go and
yeah,
discover in a different
yes,
way.
I
So tell us about
exactly.
that trip.
The first trip was 2003 to Taiwan, and I had done trips to Cuba. I was so obsessed with salsa. I sang with a salsa band with Jimmy Biala. He had a group, and so I was kind of on this path of searching and seeking, and that first trip to Taiwan, I was self-funded. Um, Actually, I applied to Asian Cultural Council and didn't get it. So the lesson out there for people listening is try again. So the first time I didn't get it, but um, at that time I realized, oh, it's actually, I shouldn't let that stop me from pursuing my dreams. And actually it wasn't that expensive, and I just borrowed money from my parents. I stopped being proud and just asked them for help. And I was very lucky that I could stay in a place that my relatives helped. I could rent the place my relatives hooked me up with, and that was, my Mandarin was really not very good at that time. It was very basic. You know, my parents really didn't push Mandarin on me at home because they wanted me to have perfect English. But yeah, that experience was, such a lesson in humility. I was just going around meeting, for instance, there's a city councilman who was Ame from Ametu, from the Ame tribe, and I was introduced to him through a professor that my cousin introduced me to, and because I was really looking for, I wanted to learn some of these songs, the
So
Ame
how did
songs.
you start actually learning some of this music, and from whom? Who was the teacher?
Right. So this city councilman, my goodness, I can't, I know I have his name in my notes, but he introduced me to an urban choir led by Ame. They were actually kind of Ame tribe, uh, Taiwanese who had to leave the eastern part of Taiwan to make money. This is like, kind of the issue with a lot of traditions being lost, right? They're in this um, capitalistic system, and they have to, make their money. They have to make ends meet. So they basically were urbanized, as they said, urbanized on Ame, but they would get together twice a week and practice their songs. They'd cook for each other and they'd just enjoy, kind of singing their songs and kind of
Did
as
you
a way to
jump in?
remember.
How did you start
I
learning the
just showed
music?
up. I know, I just showed up. And in that case, they maybe they had some paper where they had the words, but then I would just listen and sing along with, of course I couldn't read
Do you
Chinese.
remember any of those songs? Can you share anything with
Yes,
us?
there was one Hoya, hoya, hoyan, hawayan, hoyo, way, ha, hi. And then, so it's like call and response. And then everyone's hoyan, hoya, hoyan, hawayan, hoyo, way, ha, hi. So those are, what's funny is, we sang that song in the project we did with Martha Redbone and Abigail Washburn. And I love, so Martha calls these vocables. And in Chinese, in Mandarin, what the choir members, they told me, they said, oh, 句子, it's like they're empty words, but they have meaning. They said back in the day, the shamans understood the meaning of it, but they called them empty words. But so that was one aspect that I was able to kind of stumble upon, and they were so generous in welcoming me in. I think I probably was able to go to 3 rehearsals, 3 practices, and but also there was my cousin, my dad's fourth sister. She told me about Chenda, who is a famous, iconic Taiwanese folk singer on this moon lute, which is this instrument,
Yes, let us
which I
see
ended
it.
up. And so it's 乐器 in Taiwanese, no, in Mandarin, and in Taiwanese it's guakim, which is the same meaning, which is moon instrument, moon thing,
So
moon
this is a
instrument.
different cultural music side
Yes, exactly. Totally different from the
from the
Amezu,
Ami,
or
yeah.
the tribal, yes. And I learned some other um, indigenous songs. Of course, I recorded many and memorized a few. But there was like a Payuma tribe song, which actually is Pinuyumayan. Payuma is what the Japanese called it, but it was wrong actually. But Pinuyumayan, and that was a very different kind of, and these had words, but it'd be something like 부통아 두수 부투아우라우야. It's very different, and then so it's like it's a women's song actually. So, and the older women, butunga utu saura ula, those are the older women. And then the young woman sings, butunga, and then they all join in, tu saura, so it's so beautiful. And
So
then it switches, yeah.
Jen, is that an a cappella tradition?
So a lot of this, most of the songs, yes, of these tribes, they were all just voice. Um, I mean, I know that the mouth harp is one of the instruments. Like I know my Bunung friend, she gave me one, and so that is definitely played as well. But a lot of the songs, most of the songs I learned were just vocal and dance. So there's usually a dance involved. Um, so yes, the moonlit was a different,
So the
kind of
moonlute, what give us a sense of what the music is from that instrument?
yes. So of course this originated in China. It probably came from the Fujian province. And the Chinese yueqin is actually very different. The neck is not as long, it's much shorter, and this is more kind of fancy than whereas this is quite simple. But in the Chinese, moonlute is is more ornate. And so this would sound like an example. And so this song was taught to me by Chen Yin. And so when I mentioned Chen Da, that this man had passed away already by the 80s. But my teacher, Chen Yin, actually met him when she was a little girl, because I think apparently he was friends with her parents. So she remembers him, and her voice was like a woman's version of his voice. It's really amazing. And I'll include a link of her voice. I'll include many links for our audience out here. And so one of the songs she taught me is called the five-hole tune, or 五孔小调. And so here we go. So I can put my screen here, maybe. 地来真疼，我靠啊你只跟他Anyway, it's so funny. The Zoom is saying, "What language are you singing?" I'll go back to English, but no. So there's more, and I have this on Bandcamp, this version. But so from that, well, I guess we can do my arrangements later at the end, right? We'll just
Yeah,
do kind
because
of what
I'm
my
going to
teachers
try
taught me
to
first.
move us on in this
Yeah.
journey. What's so interesting
Yes.
is that this is where your father was from.
Yes. Yes. So my dad was from Tainan, still southern Taiwan. This, I had to go even further south to Hengchun, which is a township in Pingdong, which is even lower than Tainan. So, yeah, and this is music that my dad, it might be familiar to him, but I do remember an interesting anecdote when I went back to Taipei, where I saw my fourth grand uncle and auntie, who were my dad was very close with them. And so I hung out a lot with them. And so this would be my dad's mother's youngest brother and his wife. So I played this for them, and I remember Shigembe, my fourth grand auntie, she said, "Oh, 好听，但是不喜欢." That means sounds good, but I don't like it. Because to her, it reminded her of the poor people begging, playing for food, who would come to her door, and she would hear it, and it
That's
would be sad.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and because Chanda himself, before he was discovered, by ethnomusicologists, he was a very poor. I mean, walked around Taiwan barefoot with this on his back, and in the end, he actually was hit by a bus in Hengchuan. So it's very tragic. But he was discovered, and I think his biggest maybe height of his career was Lin Huaimin, Cloudgate, actually used his music as part of
I know
one of their
because I presented
pieces.
that at BAM.
Oh my
So these circles
God.
really do intersect.
Circles.
This
Yep.
is very familiar music, but I'm going to move us on
Okay, let's move.
because
There's
I
too
mean, at
much.
first it's very moving that you were able to go to where your family was from, but on your father's
Yes.
side. But then
Yes.
I think
Yep.
something spurred you to look at the Timor-Leste and think
Absolutely.
about the music there, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll go to Indonesia. But let's
Yep.
talk about that. How did
Yes.
you decide to go to Timor-Leste, and what was
Yes.
that? Was that challenging? What was that like?
It, I mean, it was so between Taiwan and Timor, actually, I got to go to China for a little bit because my mom actually is Hakka Chinese.
Uh-huh.
And even though she was born in Timor-Leste, her grandfather was born in Guangdong and in Mei Xian, and so he was the migratory force who went to Timor, and apparently my mom's mother, my maternal grandmother, was born in West Timor,
Oh,
Kupang,
yeah.
which I didn't know. I didn't know any of this until I actually went to Timor. So these are the things you discover when you get to go to the place. So in China, I did get to learn Kunshu and Shuotang from an amazing teacher named Zhang Weidong, and so I'll send links of his work as well. But that so Shuotang is storytelling. It's literally shuo is speak, tang is sing. So speak, sing, and in the back in the olden days, it'd be something like qi hua dan yang you qu. So it's Mandarin, and it's following the tones
Right.
that of naturally it's a tonal language. It's kind of in a pentatonic scale that it kind of is fit into. Um, but this teacher, Zhang Weidong, he also was an amazing Kunshu artist. And he did both of these. He was devoted
That's
to
a
both of
very
these
different
traditions.
style, isn't it?
So different. So that'd be like, so he taught me was the aria, the main song from Peony Pavilion, Yuan Lai. So that'd be like, um, I'm very out of shape because it's been almost 10 years since but that is a whole different aesthetic. And he was a master at both. And one thing he always told me with the shuo chang was he always nitpicked. He said, "You're singing it too much. You have to speak it more." And that goes to the pansori, which we'll talk about later when we go to
I
Korea.
mean, it's so
But yeah.
interesting because each of these vocal forms, whether they're quote unquote high culture or street
Mm-hmm.
culture,
Mm-hmm.
have that storytelling and that vocal quality that
Yes,
is critical.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Very
the
critical.
aesthetic of them is each very
Absolutely.
different.
Yep. Yep. And so Timor was 2010, and of course I was itching to go, and it was through the Jerome Foundation that there was a travel study grant at that time, and so I took that opportunity um, when I heard about it to just, hey, I'm gonna go to apply to go to Timor, and it was just, I can't even tell you, just so life changing, and my mother didn't even see what I got to see, because I think she was up until 14, she was in Dili, and there were really no ways to travel to go into the mountains. There were no really good roads.
I
The
mean,
roads are still really
describe Timor-Leste because I think most people don't really know. I mean,
right.
they have one impression of Taiwan, one
Yep.
impression of China, but Timor-Leste
Yes.
is a very different place.
Very different. It's so beautiful. And, as my Timorese friends say very proudly, they're the Black Asians, they're one of the Black Asians around the world. And you would think, like, these definitely the connection with Africa, for sure. And they're very proud of that. And it's so beautiful that they have their independence. Now, not to say no politic, no government is perfect by any means, but with the war, when there was the Indonesian military funded by the U.S., when that was happening, so many, a third of the population were killed, many of them elders, and so there are the traditions. That's where the traditions live, right? So devastating. Over definitely over 200,000 people were killed, really under the radar from Western media. But so my mom was only in Timor till she was 13 or 14, and my father, since he was kind of uh, import-export, as my mom would say. He knew some people in the government, and he sent my mom to Taiwan. And slowly he sent all his kids to Australia, and they moved themselves. So, yeah, it was a matter of survival. They didn't keep the house. They didn't think it'd be worth anything. Um, so, so yeah, I mean, going there, luckily I had an uncle, my mom's sister, eighth sister, um, her husband was actually built the first mall of Timor, Timor Plaza, and he was a developer, and I got to stay with him and my auntie, so my uncle and auntie, and I did 3 months of field work um, through 6 or 7 districts of the 13 districts in
So this
Timor-Leste.
field work was specifically about music, and at the same time,
Yes.
were you studying music with master teachers?
They would really blush if I called them, because, like I would say professora, because Portuguese is still one of the languages, thanks to 500 years of colonization, still one of the languages there. So when I went, I didn't yet speak Bahasa, Indonesian, so I was using my Portuguese to communicate, and I would say professora, and like the singer that one of my favorite singers, Maria de Jesus from Atauro, which is the island north of Dili. She would always blush. She'd like, professora. But no. So she was one of these, a member of a clan who I was very fortunate to get to spend time with, record, learn from, because my guide, who of course is now my friend, good friend, Nelson Turkel, he's Timorese, a rock musician and drummer, and he was, of course, I was introduced by a Spanish friend who was a filmmaker, and anyway, so many stories, Rachel. But
Well,
anyway, I
wait.
was, yes.
So can we hear something? Can we hear a song
Yes,
from
yes, yes.
Timor-Leste?
So I mentioned Maria de Jesus. She had, to me, like, I just loved her voice. It was so powerful. So this is a song that it basically is talking about the dry season, and how basically about famine, and how when the dry season comes, we really don't have enough to eat. And so the melody is ah sasurana narakleteletana baulua mamai mole amai le amai hey la la la. So that's one that she taught
I
me.
love that.
And
That's so
yeah, it's
amazing.
so beautiful. And I think when I do, at the end, when I sing my own song, I'll sing a different traditional song from a different
Okay.
district in a different language.
I'm sorry to keep
So
moving us along,
no, no, no,
but I
no. We
realize
got it.
that you've had such an incredible journey. I want to go over to Java now.
Yes. So
Because
that how that
you
happened, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So when I was in Timor for those 3 months, there was like a 10-day period when Nelson was busy with his family. So I decided to go to Indonesia, to Java, to Yogyakarta specifically, through Bali, because that was a very easy way. There was from Dili to Bali was they had a direct flight. And so I met a friend of a friend there, and she was a Javanese dancer. She just had a child, so she was kind of not dancing at that time. But her teacher, guess who, was Bu Sutia of Pujo Kusuman
Yeah.
in Jogja. So she took me to see her, and she, I asked, even though I had a little time, few days there, I asked, could I learn some some, you know, Javanese singing. And she said, well, do you want to learn, you know her voice.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
want
I
to
do.
learn with gamelan or without gamelan? And she said, I think you should start without gamelan because you're here for just a short time. So she taught me a motopat, a dandan gulo, you know,
Right.
motopat. And although I don't remember exactly the one that she taught me, I did, you know, I kind of just imitated her. I would just repeat after her. And she looked at me and she said, you should stay here for 1 or 2 years. And I thought,
Oh,
oh, you know, that was a seed planted. And I just, you know, I feel like when I got to Indonesia, even though I didn't speak any Bahasa, um, it was so warm. And everyone I met, you know, whether it be my friend or my
it's
friend's
warm
friend,
and it's warm.
it's warm and warm. Steaming hot and it's warm. But I just felt like so at home and you know, at that time I still hadn't realized that my mother's mother was born in West Timor, which is, you know, technically part of Indonesia now. But so you know, that was an incredible trip. I got to go to Bali as well and you know, get a taste of that. I hadn't yet met Bu Arini, that came later. But when I got back to Timor, you know, that seed was planted, and I wanted to go do a Fulbright in Timor Leste to kind of keep going to listen to more of the music from the other districts. But it turns out they didn't offer a Fulbright in Timor. So I thought, why don't I try Indonesia? It's close, and I also want to spend time in Indonesia. So through it's a long, wonderful
So that's
story.
how you ended up in solo.
That's how I ended up in solo because my old Stanford friend, his mother was Susan Walton. I don't know if you know Susan
Yeah,
Walton.
sure.
You must know. So she introduced me to Kitsy
Yeah.
Emerson, and Kitsy basically said, okay, if you're doing a Fulbright, you need EC Solo, which is the Art Institute of Surakarta, because you always need a sponsor for a Fulbright. And then she suggested you take from, you know, Buchandani Laras as your Sinden voice to imitate, and then Pak Darsono Vokal, almarhum, who passed away, as my theoretical teacher, who's the male teacher. So she recommended them, and I applied for it and I got it. And kind of my thesis, I guess, was I wanted to study this very rich improvisational tradition of slow singing, which is, you know, Javanese sinden, and, you know, to influence what I would do going
I mean,
forward.
we'll get back to this idea of what you mean when you say improvisation, because that's you
Yes.
have a structure. It's not a free for all.
Yes.
But
How, right. But
but
much
let's
like
let
jazz. Okay.
yeah, yes. But the thing I wanted to ask you about is the use of the voice. The
Mm-hmm.
singing style is quite different than everything you've shown us
Mm-hmm.
to so far. So could you give us a little
Mm-hmm.
example of Javanese singing?
Yeah, so actually, I think what helped me was actually kunshu a little bit with the
Uh-huh.
throwing of the voice. Um, so when I say improvisation, it's a lot like what I learned as I was learning it, a lot like jazz, African American, you know, Black American music, because you have this pulse, right? And there's all this freedom within that pulse,
Yeah.
and you basically have to listen to 1,000 singers who are like, you know, the examples, the giants, and learn their phrases. So, for instance, if I want to sing Wilujeng, um, you know, I would start like, you know, what do you say? Say, should I say Jarwo Purwo? Let me say Jarwo Noto. Let me get the Javanese right. Let's do Trahing Noto, that one.
Okay.
So Jarwo Purwo, I think it is.
Sounds Japanese.
There's so many Chakaban, right? So Jarwo Purwa yamas yamas. And then Tunga Basane Baskoro. So this pulse is always there, and you have to like be free, you know, Ramane Dewe. And then I can't remember the words right now, but that's how I feel like, oh, because of, you know, all my time singing tunes and being in Steve Coleman's band, that really prepared me for Japanese
But
singing in this
again,
crazy way.
every one of these forms has its own scale.
Exactly.
It's not a Western
Exactly.
chromatic scale. It's
Definitely not.
something, as much as learning any language, you're learning those
Exactly.
scales. Yeah.
Exactly. And because I've been outside of it for so long and haven't been listening to it constantly, I'm sure my teacher would say, "No, you sound like you're in Western." So, "Charwa, charwa, no ta," you know, like he would say, "No, you're too Western now."
All right,
But
we're gonna
yeah.
keep moving though.
Okay, let's keep moving.
Sorry. Okay, so Javanese singing has that kind of tone. Now,
Yeah,
if we go to South Korea, we're going to a whole new world.
whole new world. Yes.
And pansori, although what I will
Hmm.
say, the through line with all of these is
Hmm.
there's a story. There's
Yes.
every one of these forms has
Yep.
something that a journey that is a
Hmm.
kind of storytelling of
And
one
I
sort
think,
or another.
yes, I think I became more interested in um, singing that was not just a song form, not just like a simple. I loved this kind of narrative,
Yeah.
ever changing. Of course, the most difficult to learn.
And very
Yeah,
emotional.
very
Emotions are a big
emotional.
part of it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it was, you know, I heard Pansori for the first time, I think when I
Okay,
first came
what
back
is
from Timor.
pansori?
So pansori is sori. Well, pansori is it is a storytelling and sung tradition where I guess it's in its traditional form, it involves one singer playing all the characters and then one drummer who just plays soribuk and is basically keeping the rhythm. And these rhythms are called tangdan, and they change as the story changes. And it's, you know, it's an oral tradition. My teacher learned from Kim Soo-yeon, the great master. Of course, she learned from, I don't even know who her teacher was, but you know, it's a lineage, and you usually kind of fall into a kind of school, you know, of just learning from, you know, the master above you. And so I chose to learn with a beautiful young singer, younger than me, so Kwon Song-yi. And so she was a student of Kim Soo-yeon. And Kwon Song-yi, see, it's all threading. I met her through my Javanese friend, Srijoko Harujo Chilik, who was this amazing. Did you ever get to meet him,
I did.
Rachel? You
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Such a
I'm
beautiful
sorry.
soul. And so he was a great uh, dalang, the Javanese shadow puppetry tradition. Rising star, he was only 30 when he was killed in a car crash with him and his wife, as well as his 10-month-old son. And only his daughter survived. So Nala is, I think, now in high school. You know, she's amazing singing. So it's a tragic story. But I got to work with him and meet him when I was in Java. And at the time, I helped him apply to One Beat, our friends at One Beat, which is
Right.
a beautiful
Right.
organization. And so he was in the first cohort. So I helped him apply. Basically, you know, Elena and my friends there asked me to kind of find, you know, encourage people in Indonesia to apply. So he was one of the, you know, great artists who got in. And he met Kwon Song-yi in
Okay.
that class. And
Oh,
so
great.
when he came back to Java, I was still in Java. When he came back from the States, he played me recordings of her. he said, "Hey,
Amazing.
I met this singer." So I got to, contact her, and that's how I got with lessons with her through this scholarship program
So
that,
let's,
you know,
I want people to understand how different
yes,
pansori is from some of the other
yes,
vocal traditions that you have shared with us today,
yes.
um,
So
because
I
it's
can do a
such a
little,
different kind of power.
right, right. Um, so, with all these languages, of course, or traditions, learning the language is so, so key. I'm still a student of all of them. I think Indonesian is my strongest because I was there so long. Korean, they say I got to ikup gachi, which is second grade level. But so kind of the uh, here's one step. So aniri is the kind of talking within pansori, and it kind of goes. There's a lot of talking and then singing and then talking with singing. So an example would be like very stylized, like 그때요 심황후는 온갖 영웅이 3년이 되었고 신봉 사는 딸 생각에 어찌 울고 세월호 보냈던지 더욱 백수되었구나. 심황후 물으시되 거주 성령이 무엇이며 첫자 이른가 물어보아라. 신봉사가 첫자 말을 듣더니 눈에서 눈물이 뚝뚝뚝뚝 떨어지며 and then the drummer says ah and then he's playing a rhythm. I wish I had my drum here. I couldn't bring it to Italy, but yeah, 소맹이 아래리다, and then the audience goes 얼씨고, right? So they have
Oshiko,
the,
Oshiko.
yes, the chuim say. So it's so beautiful. I can't even, as my Korean friends say, like, you have Korean soul. But so anyway, could go on and on about pansori, but I'll send a link of a 22-minute excerpt I learned in 5 months,
I think
my
that
first
would
time
be
there.
great. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you one more question
Okay.
before we open it up for questions from the
Yes.
audience.
Yes.
But it's really about that hunger to learn music. What
Hmm.
happens when you learn from a teacher, that
Hmm.
relationship, and
Hmm.
the kind of ethics?
Hmm.
In this day and age, people often talk about appropriation.
Right.
Uh,
Hmm.
and the counter to that is, serious study and real relationship and keeping
Hmm.
traditions alive.
Right.
So I just wanted to hear some of your thoughts because you have talked so warmly and
Hmm.
passionately about the teachers who you have worked with and who are in most
Absolutely.
cases your friends now.
Absolutely. And and a lot of I try to give them opportunities too. And so it's such a sacred relationship, I think. And I know that as a teacher myself, like um, when you're imparting wisdom, that's a very sacred thing, and it's not something you just throw around, no matter how much you get paid. And actually, I remember my Kunshu teacher, Zhang Weidong, never took any money, and I just had to hang around for him to, to start to teach me. um, but it's, to me, what is so important if you are learning a tradition, and then say you are a composer, you have to give, well, even more than just giving credit, because that's almost easy to do. It's just like, crediting or citing, citations. It's the relationship, it's the constant dialogue, it's the kind of checking in. Um, I mean, and there are, I when I say check in, it's like, how are you doing? Are you in good health? Most of the time they were much older than me. In Kwon Song-yee's case, she's younger than me, but um, they are such amazing human beings and holders of so much wisdom, and these traditions that that I think they realize, and that's why they appreciated my, I think, my enthusiasm, because a lot of their own say, kids or even their own, students in their countries were not interested. They're actually interested in pop music. And they're looking to the West.
That is
So I
often the
think,
case.
yeah, yeah. So I
Um,
think that's
yeah,
so important, is that relationship and keeping in touch,
yeah. So
always.
let's
Yeah.
I'm gonna go one more place that I think we is very important, which is you as a composer, because
Okay.
you are a creative person. You have all of this richness that has come into your life and help define you as a musician.
Hmm.
And now you are creating music that is your voice,
Hmm.
your expressions about, as an artist.
Yeah.
How does all of this come together for you?
I mean, I think what I've learned is that, I think, yes, I write a song, but I feel like it's much more than just saying it's my song. We're all just a collection of who we've met and whose energy we've absorbed. So as much as I can, I like to say this melody came from, you know, this teacher taught me this. Um, if it's not a specific song, there might even be the technique, like the greco in Sindenan, which is like a little trill. So I think when I say yes, I compose this song, it is with humility. um, and I think that's why oftentimes I'm not very systematic in terms of, okay, I'm going to use this vocal technique in this song. A lot of times it does come very organically. Um, but there are cases when it's more of an experiment. So one song that I'll put a link to it. I was experimenting with this Korean shamanic tradition, which is different than pansori. It's called Donghaean Byolshingut, and it's East Coast shaman singing. And it's my teacher Hannah saw Hannah. She actually started as a pansori singer, fell in love with East Coast shaman singing, and ended up marrying the son of one of the shamans who was a daughter of Kim Sok Chul. And so she just became obsessed. So in fact, it's like we were both students of a different kind of music. But so that would be like 남산은 본이요 주사하는 국이라. So I was experimenting with, um, well, why don't I try that melody with Tetunwe Hali, which is from West Timor. So then,
That's
and
interesting.
within a story, but it's all part of this because I was fascinated with these two stories. And that's what Song of Silver Geese is all about, that this album that I wrote in homage to Srijoko Harjo, my friend who was killed in a car crash. What I found at two different times of my research, or just hanging out actually, there's a wonderful composer in Korea named Wonil. I don't know if you know Wonil. Rachel? You must know him.
Okay.
Amazing. He's a gugak musician. But
Oh,
long
okay.
story short, he told me about um, Baridegi, who was the first, folkloric legend. She was the first shaman, the mother of all shamans. She had seven brothers. No, she had seven sisters. And she was supposed to be, no, she had six sisters. She was supposed to be a boy. But the king, when she turned out a girl, he abandoned her, put her in a little boat, floated her down the river. And so, anyway, long story short, she becomes a shaman because she ends up saving her father who was dying. Um,
Well, I've
and he
seen
is
this on,
resurrected.
there's a famous film with a pansori singer that follows this Korean film. Yeah.
Oh, it's not Seopyeonjae,
Not
because that's the
Seopyeonjae.
blind, not
Right. I
Seopyeonjae.
did see that one
Ah,
too. But
so there's a
but
different one.
but one
Okay,
of the
anyway.
things that Jen, I
Yes.
just you have created in a way, it's like musical theater. It's a storytelling form that you have created where you have taken us on journeys that you and stories that you very much want to tell.
Right. Yes.
That are authentically yours. And yet all of the music that is in you comes out.
Yes, yes. I mean, so this story of Srijoko, it was such a um, tragedy, that I wanted to really create a ritual for his family. And I'm very close with his mother still. And, so the piece starts with the accident. So I have like the string quartet basically playing the score. If it were a movie, it would be playing the score of this, quiet road, and then suddenly there's this accident. And anyway, it goes on, but yes, it involves these basically, his daughter left alone, her father, her parents and her whole family have perished around her. What can she do? So the story that Satoshi Haga, the dancer, and I created was, let's, guide her with these shamans from, Baridegi from Korea, and Ho'arunahat Samane Oan from West Timor, have them guide her on how to just have hope, how to carry
Amazing.
on. So anyway, there's so much.
So
It's already
I have
7:02.
2 questions,
Okay.
actually 3
Yes.
questions that have come in. So we're going over a little,
see.
but I think they're important.
Yes.
This idea of your teachers and mentoring. Could you talk about M3?
I'd love to. I could
Mutual
talk for
mentorship for
everybody.
musicians, because in
Yes.
some ways this feels like a complete through line here.
Yes. So, in a quick summary, and I'll definitely include our link, mutualmentorshipformusicians.org. It is a mentorship initiative where the mutual is the key word, where Sara Serpa and I, we were good friends. We decided in March of 2020, as we lost all our gigs, to create this initiative for women and non-binary composer performers, and from all around the world, because we were, really just had Zoom and our online ways of communicating. So we fundraise in order to commission these artists. We kind of serve 12 per year, and through a nomination and open call process. It's very involved, and there's so many applications now. But no, so at the first meeting we pair them up, and randomly, and as long as they haven't worked together before, they are a pair. And so for 7 months they create a video and music work, and then, throughout the whole 10 months we meet twice a month over Zoom to talk about our lives, and everyone takes turns moderating. And so, our work, whatever is happening, say we have some difficult situation with a presenter or colleague, bandmate, recording engineer. So it's a chance for all of us to really support each other and talk about our music. And also a big part of our initiative is to support older women. Oftentimes, we see people who get these, are called geniuses. Men get to be called geniuses. Women are often, as they get older, kind of ignored or forgotten. And that's just, I think, a bias of the industry, the press. So this is really important to us. We award a Lifetime Achievement Award every year. We're hoping to increase the amount and the number of awards we can give to our elders, who have gone through the program. But mainly, it's also getting different genres together. There's no genre limitation in M3. We've had electronic music artists, Balinese gamelan artists, contemporary bassoon, so
Most
many.
extraordinary festival that you just
And
held,
you were there for
and
2 days.
I was so blown
Yeah.
away by the musicality and just the range of artists and the generosity. One of the things that's very clear to me with M3 is that that generosity is at its heart.
Yes. It's so, you know, this idea of mutually mentoring, no matter what age you are, no matter how much experience you have something to give, you know, and something to learn. So that is such the essence of M3 and this kind of you know, now we've funded 84 artists, commissioned 84 artists. We also have an anthology of writing. So part of the commission fee is for them to write an essay or poem or any kind of work that we publish online for free and also in a book form that we sell. And this is so important. You know, it's Sumi Tanoka talking about her first gig with Philly Joe Jones. It's Devin Gates talking about, you know, being a woman in the jazz school at Berkeley.
Totally amazing.
You know, it's Wen Junwoo, who's a trans artist, you know, writing a poem about what the bass means, you know, in his arms, and you know, Eli Maliwan, who talked about transitioning from a female saxophonist to a male saxophonist and what that meant, how he was treated differently. You know, so these are stories that Sarah and I just wished we could have read as we were coming up. And that's the whole idea with M3 is like, we're creating a program that we wish we could have had when we first
It's
moved to New York,
amazing,
you know?
and you'll be able to share links to all of this with the people
Absolutely.
who are online. Now, I have
Absolutely.
somebody who says you claim that you're in Rome, and why are you in
It's
Italy?
true. It's true. So I was very fortunate to get a Rome Prize this year, which is a fellowship, which can be 5 or 10 months. Of course, I chose 10 months to work on a project. And this project I'm working on is, it's been a long time that I've been trying to figure this out, but it's called Fertile Land, Fertile Body, an opera for, well, an opera whereby the orchestral members also serve as chorus. So they are also singers and dancers and actors. So, so I guess 20 of me from, you know, women and non-binary artists, and their the piece is really about the relationship between how environmental change, climate change is affecting our fertility and the struggles we have. Well, it's probably human caused, you know, capitalism, you know, so all these things, you know, what does fertility mean in a genocide? These are all questions that I want to think about, and I have to do many interviews of women fertility doctors and also environmental scientists, political ecologists. So yeah, it's a very big, daunting project. So yes,
I think
yes,
we're
yes.
running out of time.
I know.
And obviously we could go, there are so many more places to go. So I hope that we'll have another chance to do an
Yes,
interview again. But thank you
yes, for
so much.
sure.
This has been an
Thank
incredible journey.
you.